hero opens to 15 from the cutoff with king of diamonds, 10 of clubs.
Okay.
Button calls and the small blind calls.
Button calls, small blind calls. Okay.
Flop comes out 10 of hearts, 7 of clubs, 4 of clubs.
10 of hearts, 7 of clubs, 4 of clubs. So you've got king of diamonds, 10 of clubs. So you flop top pair, 2 flush, front door flush draw.
Backdoor flush. We got backdoor clubs.
No, I'm saying
There's a front door flush,
but I'm
yeah.
saying there's
Yeah.
a front door flush draw out there though, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Small blind checks, hero checked, and the button bets 30.
So why did you check?
I didn't know what I would do if I got raised. And I didn't have a great plan for the turn, so it felt better as a check call. I think if I had the king of clubs, I'd probably barrel and then plan to barrel another club.
Well, again, as I spoke with the earlier caller when I was going over sort of the textbook theory is that especially in a multi-way pot, the hands that you don't want to bet fold, meaning that you don't think are strong enough to put into like a bet call category, like you were going to bet them and then fold if you raised, theoretically you're supposed to put that into a checking range. Whereas, again, and I'll keep saying it, I would say that I would bet this hand a ton because you're just going to get called by like any pair. Like the name of the game at this level is value, value, value. You're not really going to get raised all that much either. I feel like too. I mean, you have a 10, so you're blocking some of the 2-pair combos. And, I think you can decide if you were to get raised, what you would do depending on the situation, who raised you, and what size. Maybe how much the guy
Okay.
had left in his stack. In general, I'm sort of over value betting my top pairs in, multi-way scenarios. We're going to have a new quiz. We're going to have a new quiz feature on Crush Live Poker version 2, which is coming out. And
Cool.
I was working on one of the quiz hands and I was like, oh, what's a good hand to do? And I gave the example, like I open aces from under the gun and I get 3 callers in the field, like in a 1-3 game. And the board comes out, 6, 7, 9 with like a 2 flush. What do I do? Now, in that case there, like I said, theory sort of on paper, you might actually check like your entire range from under the gun there against 3 field players because it like hits their, it hits their range more than your own. Whereas I say I have no problem betting, and most of the time even bet folding in a given scenario like that because people who are going to raise are going to have 2-pair and straights, but they're going to call. That's the adjustment you need to make is there's more calling that goes on at the low stakes than basically bluff raising. Do I think it's a terrible check? No, I don't think it's a terrible check. And I think that your logic is sound for checking here, obviously. So it gets checked over to the button and he bets 30. Okay.
And small blind folds,
Okay.
and the hero calls. The
Okay.
turn is the queen of diamonds.
So it looks like the pot has 105, something like that, right?
Yeah.
All right. Queen of diamonds
Yep.
on the turn. Okay.
And it checks through.
Okay. So check.
And the river is the 10 of spades. So hero leads for 55.
Okay.
And
so
this is where
hold
it
on a
gets
second.
interesting
Hold on one
because-
second.
Oh,
Hold
go
on.
ahead. Sorry.
All right. So, okay. So, again, if you were watching this on the live call-in stream, you've heard, and I'll try to, I think probably both of these hands will make YouTube highlights. And remember to like the channel, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and I'll try to put this one sort of next to each other. So we have this previous hand. So if you're watching this on the highlights, it was probably the last video that went up where I just hated the fact that the guy checked with aces at the end on, I think it was King 7-4, 7-3. Okay. So everybody knows that I'm not a big fan of checking the river at live sort of no limit. There is a time to do it though, in certain situations, and it will and it sometimes fits into a scenario where you make trips and you suspect that your opponent may have a draw. And the reason why it fits into that is because, again, part of the reason why I'm not a huge fan of checking the river at these stakes is because your opponents don't bluff enough. And of course, they don't value own themselves enough. However, what I have noticed in my 15 years of live playing is that they will bluff this card. They will bluff when top pair pairs at the end. So if I take a look at this entire sort of hand here, and we look and you say, you check call a flop, and the guy checks behind here on the turn. Now you could make the debate whether or not he's going to continue to barrel with like 5-6 or continue to barrel with like clubs or something. Maybe he does a little bit on the turn, on an offsuit high card. But remember, you are the pre-flop raiser. So with that being said, you have king 10, okay? What hands on the flop bet the flop and then check back the turn? What kind of range would you put this guy on when he bets into two people on the flop and then checks back a high blank on the turn? What types of hands?
Usually a 10.
Well, what else?
My first thought was also another 10.
Well, but what else might he do that with?
There's 5-6 of clubs makes a great combo draw. I have the 10 of clubs, so I kind of block, 10x of clubs.
Well, how about any club draw? Might bet the flop and check back the turn. How about any 5-6?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, he might have some like 7x here, or maybe like 8s or, it's cutoff versus button. I don't know how passive these games are. I don't know if people are always flatting with 9s or 8s or if they're 3-betting that cutoff versus button configuration at 1-3 in Tampa. He might have some 7x here too that he was sort of betting for protection. My point being is that if the primary sort of range that he has here is missed draws and 10x, let's just sort of suspend belief here and say your opponent arrives on the river with either 10x or a busted draw. You know that it's one of those two hands, okay? What do you think your river play should be here on 10-7-4 Queen 10?
It should probably be a check because he's likely betting all of those.
Yes, it should be a check because he will value own himself because he has trips, right? Now, you're probably just going to check call. I would assume because you're losing to ace 10. He probably doesn't have queen 10. He check back turn. So, yeah, you're beating like jack 10 and like 9-10. You could make a case if you were to have if you had ace 10 here, you could check raise the river. I think king 10 is probably pretty close. But you know what I'm saying? Like if you had ace 10, you might check raise the river for the same reasons, for value.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask when you were suggesting is a check. Is it a check to check call or check to check raise?
I think king 10 is very close. Ace 10 is definitely a check raise. But he's going... So you get into these situations where an opponent might just one-time you as a bluff and then just give up on the river. However, things have changed because that top pair has paired. So these are the times where your opponents will go for the bluff because it sort of looks scary to you. Now, of course, you have a 10, so it's less likely that he has a 10. But I'm telling you that if his primary range of getting to the river here is trip 10s or a bluff, the play is to check at the end. Now, to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, if you bet on the river, you're probably going to get called by a lot of showdown types of hands. Like, I don't know if 7x is going to fold because your line looks bizarre. And what I mean by that is that if I had 7x here and I played it, I would look you up all day if you bet from up front because I'd be like, what is this guy checked the 10 on the flop and now he's betting the river? So there is that side to it. But I still think probably the superior play is actually to check at the end. But anyways, so you bet 55, okay?
Yep. Hero bet 55, and then V raises to 230.
Wow. So button raises to 230. Yep. So, you don't have anything to do here but call. I think that this is a good bluff card for him. You don't really see bluff raising here on the river all that much at this level, but you have a 10. What are you going to do? you know?
I did tank it over for a while and kind of came to the same conclusion that you had thought about on the last, was that if he has something like queen 10, 10-7, hands that beat me, they're all betting the turn, with the
Yeah,
exception
I
of
mean,
ace
those
10.
hands aren't going to be checking back the turn. I mean, any hand that's full here that would like end up full or all betting, on the turn. It's just weird that somebody, I don't know if somebody in the live chat, I'm seeing some comments, but would this ever be a play for you to actually like make a small bet on the river instead of checking to induce a raise? That might not be a bad play either. In general, like I said, I'm not usually a fan of that, but you might make it look like you're blocking the river and you're scared of the 10, and you actually might induce a raise even though you have a 10. So that's another kind of line here. But here you just have I think just sort of a square call. What's interesting though is that again with King 10, I mean if you had Ace 10 here, and you're like, there's no way this guy has a full house, do you just assume that he has a 10 and he's not going to be able to fold it? Certainly a player at 1-3, if they're raising the river with a 10, they're not raise folding a 10. So somebody could make the case here where you're actually supposed to 3-bet jam all in. If you don't think that this guy could ever be full here, then and he plays super wide and he's just going to raise with any 10, you could make a case, I guess, for 3-bet jamming all in here. I just think it's a little bit thin, but maybe with ace 10, it just seems to me like this is going to be a bluff a lot of the time here. But I mean, it's possible he could have a 10. What ended up happening?
I ended up calling, and he said nice hand, it turns over 10-5. So I think he knew if I called, he was beat. 10-5 diamond.
He said nice call. He knew he was beat with trip 10s?
Apparently, yeah.
So let me ask you a question. I'm sorry, I have to giggle. That goes into another fallacy too. For any of you players out there, I mean, it's sort of bizarre that Button would think he's beat, right, when you call him. But this is a very, very simple concept, Brett. Why would your opponent, if your opponent thinks that he's beaten when you call him, like he raised the river, right? You called. Now he thinks you're beat. Now he thinks he's beaten. What does that mean?
Yeah.
That means that he's done something wrong, right? He's not, is he turning 10-5 into a bluff? If he's value raising and when you call, he thinks he's beat, it's entirely illogical, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes we have to go, I mean, this is an extreme example, but we have to sometimes, because I get into these spots with people, callers, hand submissions, things like that, where somebody will like, I bet this amount on the turn, heads up against my opponent. My opponent called me and I knew I was beat. And I was like, well, what are you betting? But you're betting the turn for value. And now when he calls you, you know you're beat, then you've done something wrong. You know?
Yeah. I didn't know if he was good enough to know that he's trying to blow me off a better 10.
He's going to blow you off a better 10?
The sizing was weird. I ended up calling because, at least particularly around here, value sizing there is going to be like 150 to 190. Like they want the call with another 10. They're not going to try and blow you off by going 4x.
I mean, honestly, like I know it seems crazy, like I said on paper, but if we dismiss all full houses based upon the action, I think you might have a jam all in at the end, because there is no way a guy who's playing 10-5 suited and raises the river is ever folding to a 3-bet all in. No one can ever tell me that. Like you were going to you would have stacked him, you know, you would have stacked him with King 10, but that's interesting. Hey, appreciate the call. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for having me.
If you like what you've seen here, please hit the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this call-in hand, hit the like button down below. To check out crushlivepoker.com, click on the link in the description. Use the code YTA300 to get the first 30 days for free.